Hi, I'm so glad that you could be here with me today. We're going to be looking at the contents of a little more than half box 87. I have a pile of boxes in a storage, actually two storage facilities, and a lot more at home. So today, this particular box, I have something like 40 to 50 books on the Arctic and the Eskimos and the explorers and the natives and the nature of the Arctic. And this is just a few of them. This, for example, is the annual report of the National Museums of Canada for the year 1952-53. Not too exciting. I don't think it has, oh, it does have illustrations. How about that? So it's always nice to find a book that has tables and illustrations and things like that. Here's a beautiful example of a book about Canada. It's called Crossroads, Canada. And it was put out by the Arctic Studies Center of the National Museum of Natural History, the Smithsonian Institute. The person who owned a lot of these books is now working at the Smithsonian. And I obtained about 10 boxes, perhaps, of his material. And this one is a combination of black and white photographs of native, Canadians, people in the Arctic, stuff like that, and also then artifacts, that they had. So this is quite an interesting book, as an example. Most of the books I have from the Arctic are not illustrated like this one, though. Among the Chiglit Eskimos. So here's a book by Father Emile Petitot, Petitot, translated from the French, and it's about his living with some tribes in the Arctic, for many years, and whoa. So, and that is illustrated, throughout with all kinds of drawings that I believe he did, but I'm not totally sure. And then it has maps and whatnot. So the books I have really totally explore the Arctic and the Eskimos. And here's an oddity, because this one is from the Journal of Chickasaw History, and the Chickasaws were in Oklahoma. And I've looked at several of these books, and none of them have this native woman in here. But anyway, so it's kind of an oddity. It took me a long time to find what it was all about. So this is just a small example of the native books, in my collection, which are available for sale. Now let's switch over a little bit more to other things. Here's the Majesty of Natchez, Louisiana. Is that right? And what this book has is, I think, several hundred photographs of buildings, homes, interiors and exteriors in Natchez, Louisiana. And it's just kind of interesting if you want that flavor of being in Natchez. Let's go to something literary. Here's Hercule Poirot's Casebook. Wow, I had this vision of keeping this book myself and reading it for the next 10 years because it has hundreds of stories about Hercule Poirot by Agatha Christie. And I don't believe that there's any illustrations. They couldn't afford illustrations for this book, but they got all the stories. There's, I believe, over 100 stories in here. And of course, these have been made into TV shows, by Masterpiece Theatre and all kinds of other, people filming, mostly in the UK and Canada and places like that. But it's a very handsome book. Whoa. A View of the Spree, S-P-R-E-E. Did you know that the German Kaiser, who was Kaiser during the First World War, and he lost the throne because they lost the war. Anyway, he was quite a character, and many deaths and things have been laid to his doorstep. Well, anyway, he married an American grocer's daughter, who became the sanctified Pompadour. And this is a book all about that. And I don't know if there's any, unfortunately there's no photos, but the story is magnificent. It's so unusual. Let's go to something else here. This is called Feeding the Eye by Anne Hollander, and it has a classic nude here on the cover, but that covers up the fact that this book is all about different dress through the centuries, and artists and everything who appreciate that. Okay, it starts off with a section that has from page 3 to page 91, Isadora Duncan, Franz Kafka, Gabrielle Chanel, Václav Nijinsky, Martha Graham, Alex Gress, George Balanchine, Henri Cartier-Bresson, Simone de Beauvoir, and Yves Saint Laurent. So that's all sort of, having to do with how these people dress and display themselves for the public. Then there's modern arts, dress, accounting for fashion, the decorated body, the tight corset, the kimono, men in black, fashion and image, androgyny and transvestism. So it's just a very interesting book with many different looks at culture and life. Let's go now more into the arts. And here is a book called Wood Engraving and Woodcuts by Claire Layton. And there was a series of these books about in the arts. There was something like 70 books or something in the series. This is number 2 in the series, so it's very early in the series. Let me show you what it features. It features magnificent black and white renditions of art on every single page practically, and explains them and talks about them, and they just come to life. The contrast between the darks and the lights is fabulous. So you can really see that. So that's a very interesting book. Now let's go to something just tiny. It's called Highlights of Tarot by the Builders of the Adytum, Adytum. It's a mysterious kind of mystical book. Let's see, what did I, because the tarot is not something that's known to its depth. It looks to some people, looks like a game that you can play with these cards, 78 cards, but it's more than that. As it says here, take your tarot seriously and treasure it, for if you do, it will guide you unerringly along the path leading out from the darkness of limitation and bondage of ignorance into the light of understanding and truth, and ultimately into the fullness of cosmic consciousness. So they are believing that we can attain cosmic consciousness just by getting to know how to use the tarot cards. Now let's go to something else, and that is Bob Dylan's Chronicles. So you've heard Bob Dylan's songs, and they are often memorable because they have, they also, of course, in the songs, they rhyme. The verses rhyme. But his prose is exceptionally interesting, very fine. Let me see, where did I mark something that I thought would be fun to look at? Oh, I've lost the page. Well, let's see. Don't give me that dance that God is with us or that God supports us. Let's get down to brass tacks. There isn't any moral order. You can forget that. Morality has nothing in common with politics. It's not there to transgress. It's either high ground or low ground. This is the way the world is, and nothing's going to change it. Well, he's very dark in some of his writings, isn't he? In some of his songs, very dark. And I think it comes out also in his prose. So here you have about 200 pages of Bob Dylan speaking his mind. It's not connected necessarily with any of his books. Any of his records. And here is Jacques Maritain. You ever heard of Jacques Maritain? He's a philosopher. He's French. Christian humanism. This is Christianity. This is philosophy. This was very big in the 20s, 30s, 40s. This is called The Freedom of the Intellect and Other Conversations with Theonas, Theonas, by Jacques Maritain. London, Sheedon Ward, 1933. Pardon me, 1935. The first edition was 1933. And it's just a magnificent book of philosophy. And he's a known philosopher. This book has extra value because of that. Now, from philosophy, let's delve into some astrology. Destiny ×6. Fascinating true stories from the confidential files of a famous astrologer by Catherine de Jersey and Isabella Tavez. So this takes an astrologer through like 24 hours or 48 hours or something like that, and shows her conversations with people, her setting up readings with people, her doing readings with people, her saving people's lives sometimes because of some of the really important things that she can tell them. And as an astrologer, I know that many marriages do break up in the bedroom, even today, among one brutally frank teenager. Just talking about sex isn't enough. Oh, I won't read that paragraph. It's not the paragraph I thought it was. But anyway, so she gets into life and all the things that constitute the problems and adventures and things that we have in life. And an astrologer can do that. They just can do that. So those were mainly the books I wanted to talk about. There's some others here. How about inorganic quantitative analysis? I mean, there's books here that are philosophy. There's books here that are all about science, philosophy, science, and the arts, and how they overlap. So these are some of the books that I picked out from box. What was the box?
87.
87, box 87. So there are more books in 87. Every box has a different array of books. They vary in terms of what areas of life they're about, fiction and nonfiction and the arts and things like that. That's stuff that I've collected for the last, maybe 40 years or something, right? So that goes back to like the 1950s and 60s when I was just a kid. So I hope you enjoy that. There's many more books where those came from, and we'll have some more videos telling you more. Thank you very much for tuning in and seeing this. Thanks now.